There is an error most men make that has no sound, no awkward line, no stumble, no rejection scene from a bad movie. It happens entirely inside. A shift so fast, so automatic, that you don't even know it occurred. But she does. She always does. You walk into a room. You're relaxed. Your shoulders are down. Your breathing is normal. You're talking to a friend, maybe laughing, maybe not thinking about anything in particular. And then you see her, and something inside you rearranges. Today we're going to talk about the silent error with a 10. Not a dating trick, not a pickup line. Something far more fundamental. The involuntary hierarchy shift that happens in a man's body the moment he encounters a woman of extraordinary beauty, and why that shift is the very thing that pushes her away. Stay with me. This one matters. Let's set the scene in the most general terms possible. Not a story, just reality. A man is somewhere. A coffee shop, an airport, lounge, a bookstore, a networking event. He is behaving normally. His voice sits in its natural register. His posture is whatever his posture is. He takes up the space he normally takes up. He is, in that moment, just himself. Then a woman walks in who is, by his own internal assessment, strikingly beautiful. Not just attractive, the kind of beauty that feels almost aggressive in its impact. A 10 by whatever metric his subconscious is using. And here is what happens in the next 3 to 5 seconds. And I want you to pay very close attention, because this is the part nobody talks about. His breathing changes. It becomes slightly shallower. His shoulders pull inward, not dramatically, just a fraction. His chin drops, or alternatively, lifts too high in overcompensation. His voice, when he next speaks, will either rise in pitch or become artificially deep. His blink rate increases. His gestures become either smaller and more contained, or larger and more performative. His laugh, if he laughs, arrives too quickly and lasts a beat too long. None of this is conscious. None of it is chosen. It is the body's automatic response to a perceived shift in hierarchy. His nervous system has just performed a rapid, silent calculation, and the result of that calculation is, she is above me. Not in words, not in thought, in posture, in breath, in the micro-tensions of his facial muscles, in the chemical cocktail that just flooded his bloodstream. He has, without deciding to, moved from person in a room to person auditioning. And this is the silent error. Now, let's be honest about what auditioning looks like, because most men have never seen themselves do it. When a man enters audition mode, his entire behavioral framework reorganizes around one goal: securing her approval. And the tragedy is that every single behavior generated by this goal is repulsive to the very person he's trying to attract. Here's what the audition looks like from the outside. The voice shift. This is the most immediate tell. A man's voice is one of the primary signals of his internal state. When he feels settled, grounded, and unself-conscious, his voice sits in its lowest natural register. It's unhurried. There are pauses. There's resonance. When he enters audition mode, his voice migrates, either upward in pitch, signaling submission, or into an artificially low growl, signaling performance. Both are detectable. Both communicate the same thing. I have left my center. The body contraction. A man who is comfortable takes up space without thinking about it. A man who is auditioning either shrinks, pulling his elbows in, crossing his ankles, reducing his physical footprint, or he expands artificially, spreading too wide, leaning too far back, taking up space in a way that looks like a display rather than a natural state. The difference between genuine ease and performed ease is enormous, and it is felt, not analyzed. The attention lock. This is perhaps the most damaging. A man in audition mode gives the woman too much attention, too fast. He orients his entire body toward her. His eyes track her. He responds to everything she says with too much enthusiasm. He laughs at things that aren't funny. He asks questions not because he's curious, but because he's trying to sustain her engagement. The underlying message of all this is, You are the most important thing in this room, and I am trying to earn my place in your attention. The agreement reflex. Watch for this one. A man who is centered will disagree naturally when he disagrees. A man who is auditioning will find himself nodding, agreeing, mirroring her opinions, softening his own positions, because somewhere in his nervous system, disagreement has been recategorized as risk. And here is the critical point. None of these behaviors are decisions. They are reflexes. They are the downstream consequences of that initial internal shift, the moment his system decided she was above him in the hierarchy. He didn't choose to audition. His body chose for him. Now, let's talk about the other side. Let's talk about what a very beautiful woman actually experiences when this happens, because this is where most men's understanding completely breaks down. A woman who is exceptionally attractive has been living inside a very specific social reality since approximately the age of 14 or 15. From that point onward, the vast majority of men she encounters undergo exactly the shift we just described. She has been watching men rearrange themselves in her presence for years. In some cases, for decades. This means she has developed an extraordinarily refined sensitivity to incongruence. She doesn't analyze it intellectually. She doesn't think, his voice just rose by a quarter octave and his blink rate increased. She feels it. It registers as a sensation, something between discomfort and boredom, something she might describe as, he's trying too hard, or something felt off, or simply, I wasn't attracted. But what she's actually detecting is the hierarchy shift. She is detecting that this man has just placed her above himself. And this is the paradox that most men never grasp. The moment you place her above you, you become unattractive to her. Not because she is cruel, not because she is playing games, because her nervous system is wired to respond to a man who has a stable internal hierarchy that does not rearrange itself based on her appearance. Let me say that differently because it's important. Her beauty is, in a sense, a test. Not one she's administering consciously, but one that exists structurally. The test is, does this man's sense of himself remain stable in my presence? If yes, he registers as a potential equal, a potential someone worth her attention. If no, if his self-concept visibly wobbles, if his behavior reorganizes around her approval, he registers as someone who has just disqualified himself. This is not arrogance on her part. This is a deep, evolved sensitivity to a very specific signal: male self-stability under pressure. Think about it from her perspective. She has, over the course of her life, watched hundreds, possibly thousands of men lose their center the moment they saw her. The men who stood out, the ones she was drawn to, were invariably the ones who didn't shift, the ones whose voice stayed where it was, whose posture didn't change, who treated her with the same level of attention they gave everyone else. Not with less attention, not with coldness or deliberate indifference, but with the same natural, unforced engagement they offered the world in general. These men were rare, and their rarity is precisely what made them magnetic. Now here is the truly devastating part of this dynamic. The men who shift, the auditioners, are often genuinely good men. They're often intelligent, capable, successful in other domains of life. The shift doesn't happen because they're weak. It happens because they're human. The male nervous system is designed to respond to beauty with heightened arousal, and heightened arousal destabilizes the frontal cortex's grip on behavior. This is neurochemistry, not character failure. But she doesn't experience your neurochemistry. She experiences the output, the changed voice, the eager eyes, the slightly too fast agreement, the posture that says, I am performing for you. And that output, regardless of its neurochemical origin, communicates one thing. This man does not see himself as my equal. And a woman, particularly a beautiful woman, is not attracted to a man she has to look down at. Not physically down, hierarchically down. She is attracted to a man she can look across at, eye to eye, center to center, without the distortion of his projection or his need. There's a layer beneath this that most content on this topic never reaches, so let's go there. When a man auditions for a beautiful woman, he is not actually responding to her. He is responding to his projection of her. He has, in the space of those first 3 seconds, constructed an entire narrative about her value, about what being with her would mean, about how her approval would feel. And he is now performing for that narrative, not for the actual human being standing in front of him. This is why beautiful women so often report feeling unseen. Think about that. The women who receive the most visual attention in any room are frequently the ones who feel the most invisible, because the attention they receive is not directed at them. It is directed at the image of them, at the projection, at the idea of them that the man constructed in the first 3 seconds and is now desperately trying to win. She can feel this. She can feel that his excitement is not about her, not about what she said, not about how she thinks, not about the specific texture of her personality, but about what she represents, about her category, about the word 10 and everything it implies. And this feeling of being categorized rather than encountered is one of the most alienating experiences in the psychology of beautiful women. It is the reason so many of them end up with men who, on paper, seem like unlikely matches. Men who didn't perform. Men who were perhaps not even that physically impressive. Men who simply stayed in themselves. Because when a man stays in himself, when his internal hierarchy doesn't shift, when his voice doesn't change, when his attention is present but not desperate, something very unusual happens in her experience. She feels met, not worshipped, not evaluated, met. And for a woman who has spent her life being projected onto, being met is intoxicating. This is the great irony. The thing most men think will attract a beautiful woman, showing her how much her beauty affects them, is the very thing that ensures she will never feel attracted in return. Because what she's looking for is not a man who is affected by her beauty. She's looking for a man who can see it, acknowledge it, and remain fundamentally unmoved in his sense of himself. Not unappreciative, unmoved. There is a vast difference. So what does a man actually do with this information? The first thing to understand is that this is not a technique problem. You cannot fix this with body language hacks. You cannot fix it by memorizing power poses or practicing a deeper voice in the mirror. Those are surface interventions applied to a structural issue. The structure is your internal hierarchy, the unconscious ranking system that places you below a woman the moment you perceive her as exceptionally beautiful. The real work is in the hierarchy itself. This means developing a relationship with your own value is stable enough to withstand the destabilizing force of beauty. But there is a more immediate, practical shift that can begin right now, and it is this. Notice the moment of the shift. That's it. That's the first and most important intervention. The next time you see a woman who triggers that internal rearrangement, notice it. Feel the breath change. Feel the shoulders move. Feel the voice start to migrate. And in that moment of noticing, you create a tiny gap between the stimulus and the response. And in that gap, you have a choice. The choice is not to suppress the response, not to pretend you're not affected. The choice is simply to stay in your posture, to stay in your voice, to stay in the rhythm of attention you were already in before she appeared. Not because you're performing indifference, but because you're choosing not to abandon yourself. And that, the simple act of not abandoning yourself in the presence of beauty, is the single most attractive thing a man can do. Not because it's a strategy, because it's the truth. It communicates, at the deepest level her nervous system can read, I know who I am. And that doesn't change based on who walks into the room. Here's what I want you to take from this. The silent error with a 10 is not about her. It was never about her. It is about the relationship you have with yourself. Specifically, the stability of that relationship under pressure. Every beautiful woman you've ever lost interest from, she didn't reject you. She responded to the version of you that showed up after the shift. The performing version, the auditioning version. The version that had already decided she was above him before a single word was exchanged. The version before the shift, the one who was just standing there, breathing normally, being a person in a room, that's the one she would have been interested in. He just never stayed long enough for her to meet him. Something to think about. If this reframed something for you, subscribe.